The city of Philadelphia no longer wants landlords to look at eviction records. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have a great article for you today out of the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But before I get into that article, go ahead, hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed, and I'll keep working to bring you great articles about the eviction moratorium and other news that's of interest to landlords. All right, so this article comes to us from whyy.org, and it says, Philly Council bill limiting landlords' use of eviction records advances. Dominique London's family lived in their Winfield apartment most of her life. At 28, it was the only place she ever thought of as home. The first sign of change came in December 2016 when her family got a letter saying new management had taken over the apartment building. 2 months later, she got another letter saying her family had to leave and only had 2 months to find a new home. London tried to apply for another apartment nearby, but couldn't get approved anywhere. She was confused. London was employed and knew she could afford 3 times the rent. I didn't understand why there was no mechanism in place to explain to me why, she said. It wasn't until later that I learned I actually had an eviction on my record, and I didn't know about it because I'd never been summoned to court. All right, so here's the thing, okay? A lot of landlords, the moment that they can, they instantly file for eviction against the tenant, okay, if they have non-payment of rent specifically. Now, that doesn't mean that the tenant is necessarily going to be evicted or have been evicted from their property, but that the eviction was filed, and a lot of the times that information is searchable, and I have no problem with it, because what a lot of tenants do is that they will pay the rent super duper late, or they will, move out on their own, or they'll do whatever they can so that they don't get the eviction on their record. But they kind of forget that, the filing is actually on our record too. And that filing does not look good to a lot of landlords. If I see a tenant's record and it says that a landlord even filed eviction against them, there's no way I'm going to let them into my property, because that already lets you know that this tenant has a history of going through the eviction process, and I don't want that to happen with me. And I really, if I was looking at a tenant where it was a very old eviction filing, and I'm talking about 10 plus years, maybe, but that still should be up to the landlord's discretion. That shouldn't be up to the city or any sort of law or, the city council to make that decision. We're talking about your property, and the last thing you want is to take a huge loss because you put a bad tenant into your property. London had never been evicted, yet the threat from a landlord followed her. Eventually, she found a place that would accept her, but it's structurally unsafe. My entire quality of life is much different, and the fact that it wasn't my choice to be here drives me absolutely crazy, she said. I've been diagnosed with PTSD, specifically because of displacement. All right, that was a bunch of crap I just read there. This is one of those tenant-friendly articles that I just absolutely can't stand. They throw in a whole bunch of stuff that, absolutely doesn't even make sense, okay? Like, when you go back to here, right, the new management took over her old apartment, right, and gave her the required notice, 60 months, that she needed to move out. If she didn't have a current lease, or if she did have a current lease, then that letting her know that she needs to move out within 60 days is within their rights. Now, if they're doing that so that they can get the unit rehabbed and then perhaps get another tenant in there that will pay more, that's their right. Okay, I mean, don't feel bad about it. It's just the way things work. That's bound to happen eventually for a lot of tenants. Now, going into this other part where it says that she was diagnosed with PTSD because of having to move. Well, I'm sorry, but I think that's a bunch of crap, okay? You might have a lot of stuff going on in your life, but if you're so fragile that having to move out of an apartment gives you PTSD. I mean, think about the real people who are suffering from PTSD. War veterans. Moving from your apartment is not PTSD. Okay, you're just, I just can't stand reading stuff like that. London told her story at the latest committee hearing about council member Kendra Brooks' Renters Access Act. The legislation passed Tuesday night out of committee and will be up for a final vote June 17th. The pair of bills, originally introduced in April, would prohibit landlords from denying housing based solely on eviction records and require them to provide another reason for denying prospective tenants. The coupled bills will also provide guidelines on how eviction records can be used when landlords review applications if they pass. Well, yeah, that's a gist of the bill right there, okay? And here's the thing. Smart landlords, they're not going to, reject somebody based solely on an eviction record if this does pass. Okay, they're going to find another reason, and the eviction record will be just icing on the cake, okay? So they're going to be like, oh, well, looks like your credit sucks, and, you have an eviction on your record. Or, oh, you have a minor criminal history, and you have, so there's always going to be another reason. One of my favorite reasons to use is that I found a better candidate, okay? I always can find a better candidate. It's just pretty simple, okay? That's why you were rejected. You weren't rejected because you weren't a good candidate. You were rejected because I found a better one. Applying for rental housing should not be a black box, Brooks said. Making this process more transparent will help landlords find tenants that best meet the appropriate criteria and save renters from spending hundreds of dollars on applications they can't afford. Eviction records follow people and can be permanent stain that leads to a loss of housing subsidy vouchers and ineligibility from other public housing programs. People with eviction records are often screened out of private housing. Yeah, and that's another fact right there. And they go into it a little bit further in this article, but they're trying to create an exemption for public housing and for affordable housing providers. And that's the kind of joke that I hate the most, okay? Maybe the affordable and the public housing are the ones who should be housing the people with evictions on their record, since they're the ones who are supposed to be providing a public good. Okay, private owners who own private property should be allowed to get rid of problem tenants like nothing, okay? I mean, it's kind of the opposite of the way I believe things should work. Like London saw, an eviction record does not necessarily mean a tenant was evicted. According to Rashida Phillips, managing attorney for housing policy in the housing community at Community Legal Services, about a quarter of filings from 2015 to 2020 did not result in judgment against the tenant. The result is that otherwise worthy applicants are being denied access to critically needed housing, often severely limiting their options and subjecting them to potential homelessness, Phillips said. Yeah, well, Phillips is not a housing provider, so I truly doubt she knows that whether these people are otherwise worthy applicants or not. If you have an eviction filing on your record, that means you still screwed up. You just were able to correct that mistake at some point, and you weren't kicked out. Maybe from the graces of the landlord alone, okay? Because that doesn't mean that you are an otherwise worthy applicant. that just means that you didn't go completely through the eviction process. Maybe you just left on your own. I know a lot of tenants, they've done that to me. I filed against them, and they just were like, you know what, I won't be able to pay you. I won't win this suit, so I'm just going to leave. Well, we didn't have to go all the way through the case in court. If passed with the most updated amendments, the proposed protection would not let landlords deny potential clients solely based on credit scores, failure to pay rent utility bills during the pandemic, and eviction records more than 4 years old. It would also force landlords to make screening criteria written and accessible to all renters and forbid automatic exclusions based on eviction records. If a landlord does deny a prospective tenant, they have to provide a reason within 3 business days. Applicants also have the right to dispute the accuracy of third-party information and request... Oh man, I just lost my sentence. And request reconsideration of their application. Okay, so let's dive a little bit into what that says there. Okay, it says that the proposed protections will not let landlords deny potential clients solely because of credit scores, failure to pay rent, or utility bills during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so remember what they said there, solely. That means that you can tie multiple things in together and you can still deny tenants, or you can still deny potential clients because of them not paying rent or utility bills during the pandemic, but that can't be the only reason you deny them. The other thing it says here is that if your eviction record is more than 4 years old, okay, and that's another thing where the landlord's just not going to tell you that you got denied for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old eviction. Okay, they're just going to say that it was something else. And then it says that it would force landlords to make screening criteria written and accessible to renters and forbid automatic exclusions based on eviction records. So if they do that, if they make it so that every landlord has to put their screening criteria as public, you know what I would do? I would have the most extreme, strict criteria you ever saw. I would have so many things that they don't even cover here that it would be unbelievable. And I wouldn't even follow them all. But I would be able to use them to exclude whoever I wanted after that point. See, they think that landlords aren't smart and that we're not smart enough to work around all these little criterias and all this stuff that they create. But the truth of the matter is, right, that we are not idiots, okay? We're going to not put a person in our property who's going to tear it up if we don't have to, okay? And overall, I don't agree with all these additional landlord restrictions and all these new laws that all these cities are always trying to pass. And the only thing I want is for landlords to have the right to put into their property whoever they want and to make money off of their property and just, return real estate to being the good investment that it is.